Greetings, dear viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Well, this is the video that had to be made about Trump and El Paso. So just a couple of days ago, someone went to a shopping mall in El Paso, Texas, and shot dead quite a few people. Is it 12 people have died so far? A few more injured, some of whom may yet succumb to their wounds. Now, okay, presumption of innocence, but the only suspect alleged to have shot anyone was a white male. That's it, and only one shooter. So if it wasn't him, I don't know. Could he plead insanity? We'll see. But the suspect who's been arrested in connection with this crime is an ardent Trump supporter and published a manifesto about 20 minutes before he began killing people, saying how much he detests Hispanic immigrants. So El Paso is very close to the border with Mexico, and so there are many Hispanic Americans there, US citizens of Hispanic ancestry, or indeed Mexicans who are living in the United States illegally, perhaps a few illegally. But even if someone is there illegally, they certainly don't deserve to be killed for it. And that's that. And obviously, Texas was part of Mexico before it was part of the United States. So many of these Hispanic people would have ancestry in the state, which goes back longer than the white Anglo-Americans and others. Well, it was just so predictable. I forecast this kind of thing months ago. No, I didn't say it was going to be El Paso or in a shopping center or whatever, but saying that, mark my words, what Trump is saying is going to lead to some nut opening fire on people. It was very plain to see. It's also notable that when a Muslim person commits a terrorist act, then the Fox News brigade, they will be then trying to lay the blame on Muslims in general, all over the world, all 1 billion Muslims, saying it's a hateful ideology, it's antithetical to American values, and so forth. But if a white murders other people for racist reasons, or a Christian murders other people for religious reasons, it's never whites and or Christians who are responsible on the whole. And I agree, it's not. I'm not responsible for this crime. Christianity is not responsible for this crime. The individual, those of his ilk who encourage this kind of thing, they are. And let's say it, President Donald Trump, he is indirectly responsible for this. He has been out there preaching hatred since the day he declared for public office, and then he goes on television to say that he rejects odium against other Americans, and he spurns racism, and white supremacy is detestable and all the rest of it. These are crocodile tears. These are weasel words. It's not one bit convincing. He has not apologized for incessantly spewing out hatred against ethnic minorities. He has not got down on his knees and begged forgiveness from the families of the bereaved, because Trump is what inspired this crime. It's blindingly blatant. You'd have to be particularly stupid or utterly dishonest to dispute that. No, Trump did not say, take a gun, go to El Paso and kill Hispanic people. No, he didn't spell it out like that. I mean, he wouldn't have the bravery to actually say it crystal clear like that. So he has not refuted everything he said since he entered political life. And he entered the political forum in 2015 with a speech in which he was expressing his detestation of Mexicans coming to the United States, whether legal or illegal, saying they're rapists, drug dealers, and all the rest of it, and murderers. Now, it's true that a few Mexican people in the United States have been convicted of all these crimes. People of all races have been convicted of all these crimes. In fairness to Trump, he said that he imagined some of them were good people. He obviously didn't distinguish between between legal and illegal immigration. That is all bad if it comes from there. Here's a man who's actually assisted immigration again and again by marrying immigrants on 2 occasions. So he's constantly calumniating ethnic minorities, and he's directed odium against them, and that causes some people to take up arms. And I know that some people object to Hispanic Americans speaking Spanish in the United States, displaying other flags like the Hispanic flag, but for white groups that doesn't happen. I mean, some Hispanics are white. It's debatable who's white. Doesn't matter to me, but such demarcations matter very deeply to white supremacists. Like Irish Americans in the United States, nobody questions their American patriotism for flying the Irish tricolour, especially on St. Patrick's Day, or other white groups like flying the Cross of St. Andrews if you're Scots American, or the German flag if you're a German American, and things like that. So he is dehumanizing people, calling these Hispanic people an infestation, as though they're verminious, And what would you do with rodents? You'd extirpate them. You want to kill every last one. You want to lay out poison with them. You lay poison for them, declare chemical warfare on them, trap them, and so on. And why choose that particular animal rather than any other? Because it's associated with filth, with disease, provokes the most visceral reaction in people. It's vile. It is straight from the Nazi playbook. You should see The Eternal Jew, this Nazi documentary, intended to cause a spike in anti-Semitic hatred, and it did. This bile, unfortunately, it was highly successful, showing rats and then cutting to Jews, Jews, trying to make the association very close in people's minds. And obviously that was presaging the Holocaust. Now, I don't think that genocide is going to break out in the United States. Obviously, killing people for their race is an act of genocide. As Raphael Lemkin said, killing even a single person for his or her membership of a ethnic or religious group is genocide. We're not talking large-scale governmental organized genocide. No, I'm not claiming that. But more of these racist murders will continue, especially as long as Trump provides the mood music for this kind of thing. He set a time bomb in people's minds. His public life has all been about hyper-aggression, about spite, about getting people to feel hatred for those of other ethnic and religious groups. So he's odious, not any ethnic minority person. So that speech he gave in which he decried this sort of bigotry, well, it was clear his heart was not in it. It was delivered in a monotone. It was completely bland. It really wasn't him. You know what he's like when he's riffing on his favorite talking points, that he's very animated when he gives his racial screeds, and he just doesn't hold back. These things are highly emotional. He wasn't one bit fired up. So those were not his words. These were not his speech patterns, not his vocabulary. Blatantly, this was written for him, and it was just reading off the teleprompter something supposed to be presidential to some way row back on the racism he spewed out without actually saying, I retract my earlier despicable pronouncements. So he has pumped out this invective for a few years now, inveighing against ethnic minority people, particularly Hispanic people. What is a Hispanic person? Well, it's questionable whether a Hispanic person is defined by ethnicity or language. If you are a person who has Spanish as your first language, I suppose you're Hispanic. Now, obviously, sometimes they have ethnic origins in Spain. They often have ethnicity which is Mesoamerican, as in people between what's now the United States and Colombia. Those people were Mesoamerican, between the Americas, the people whose ancestors lived there before 1492. They're Mesoamerican peoples. Some of the Native American tribes of the United States, they learned Spanish before they learned English, so in that sense they could be regarded as being Hispanic American. And often people are of mixed ethnicity, partly European, partly Mesoamerican ancestry, partly black. There are black people who are Hispanic, whose first language is Spanish. Take the Dominican Republic, there are a lot of most people in the Dominican Republic are black. There are black Mexican people, fully black, and they are Mexican. Spanish is their language, and so forth. So he's constantly spewing venom at Hispanics, and he has previous, this goes back to the 1980s, inveighing against certain ethnic groups. There was a notorious case of the Central Park jogger, a woman who was set upon, raped by several young men, and severely beaten up, almost to the point of death. And what did Trump do? Saying these people had unbelievable rights, the suspects. So suspects shouldn't have rights, we should have presumption of innocence. But when he's investigated, or one of his own is investigated, it's completely different. He throws the toys out of the pram, that this is Nazism, that people should legally and entirely peacefully and ethically investigate him. He thinks that's outrageous, completely unacceptable. But if an ethnic minority person is accused of a crime, no, they should have no rights. They shouldn't be treated with any decency or humanity. It's jaw-dropping, it's nauseating, as is so often the case with Trump, and saying that these suspects identified in the Central Park jogger case, they were all minors at the time, these black and Hispanic boys. Anyway, cut a long story short, in the long run, they were completely vindicated and exonerated. They're free. And he continued to insist that they were guilty and that they should have got the death penalty. It is staggering. Knowing all this, the Clintons were still friends of his and took his money, despite him being clearly vile and unethical, despite him being actually someone who held views inimical to American values, like the right to a fair trial. Because there was a racial angle to this, because the woman who was raped, she's white. Anyway, So constantly saying that Hispanic people coming to the United States is an invasion, legal or illegal, not drawing any distinction. Legal people who legally came in under Trump's administration. It is not an invasion to come in peacefully. When whites came to the United States, was that an invasion of the Native American peoples? Sometimes it was an outright invasion, coming with weapons and driving off their land. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes land was unoccupied, or indeed land was purchased. But it doesn't care about when actual invasions took place. And indeed, of course, he assists invasions and illegal occupations in the Middle East, in relation to Palestine, in relation to Syria, Lebanon, and so forth. So what do you do if you are invaded? Well, you'd fight back, wouldn't you? Isn't that the self-respecting thing to do? This is not a metaphor. Fighting back in an absolutely literal sense, with guns. And Trump knows that. Even he's not so stupid as to imagine that's not the case. Remember, it's the gun nuts as well as the white supremacists. They overlap quite a lot, who are on his side. Now, if you're an ordinary gun owner who hunts or has one for personal protection, that's different. But someone who's got, more guns than, let's see, years of school would be a gun nut. Anyway, so he seems to suggest that Hispanics are an existential threat to the United States. Remember, since 1492, tens of millions of immigrants have arrived in what is now the United States, but as always the next thousand is going to be the end of the world, as though the United States is in mortal peril for demographic change, which has always been going on. Think how much peril that was for the indigenous peoples of North America. There used to be anti-British sentiment in the United States shortly after the American Revolution. Nobody stirs that kind of bigotry anymore, I'm pleased to say. I'm an Irish Catholic. There was hostility towards us in the United States. The Know-Nothings in the 1840s and for some time afterwards. I'm very pleased that's gone. The latest group is seen to be dangerous. I say latest group, but as I pointed out, some Hispanic people were in what's now the United States long before white Americans, certainly in particular states. There was anti-German bigotry in the First World War and the Second World War, which is, of course, detestable. No one should suffer this kind of thing. It'd be wrong of Trump. It'd be wrong for Trump to be criticised for that, and I said this to him. Trump should get it in the neck for all sorts of things, but he shouldn't be attacked for his German ethnicity, and he isn't. Anti-Semitism. There used to be an awful lot of that in the United States. Unfortunately, it's not quite disappeared. He's got Jewish in-laws, so if it's wrong to mistreat someone for being ethnically German or British or Jewish or whatever, it's also wrong to mistreat that person for being Hispanic, to saying if this person's an American citizen, they don't have the right to be there, to say if they've got a green card, they shouldn't be allowed to be there despite being legally permitted in. And there he is always whinging, the media's very unfair to me, the fake news media, for reporting his words correctly. What a crybaby. He's a wimp. He's a snowflake, as they accuse the leftists of being, and sure, sometimes the leftists are. So Trump has prepared the public mind for this kind of thing, suggesting non-whites shouldn't have the same rights as whites. That those 4 congresswomen, that if they express views that he doesn't like, they should leave the country. He doesn't say that about whites who express views that he doesn't share. So whites have got a right to disagree, but non-whites do not. It's sickening. So he's vile, he's utterly dishonest, and he doesn't even have the courage of his convictions. As I say, I don't think he actually is anti-black. He appointed Omarosa and Ben Carson. Has he appointed Hispanic people to high office? Possibly. He might not even realize they're Hispanic. He's so stupid. He seems to be an ally of Ted Cruz now. Well, more about him on another occasion, who's partly Hispanic, who doesn't speak Spanish, perhaps to emphasize just how American he is, despite being born in Canada. So Trump is almost non-stop satanizing ethnic minorities, blaming them for crime. Obviously, crime is committed by people of all ethnic groups. If someone commits a crime, he or she is to blame for that. Not everybody of the same ethnic category. This is absurd, illogical, and completely unjust. But he is stoking hostility towards ethnic minority people, and it was bound to increase asperity when he does that, because hundreds of millions of people hear what he says. He's heightened prejudice and discrimination, not legal discrimination, but informal discrimination, by saying these sorts of things. And he's abused the dignity of his office. If it comes with the imprimatur of the White House, a lot of people saying, well, it's got to be true then. We've got to respect our president. And what a huge failure he's been on illegal immigration, which has increased very considerably under him. It's been a massive own goal. It's been a policy calamity for him. So words lead to actions. Insightful language. Right? If you're constantly traducing religious and racial minorities, that will lead to more hatred against them, and that will lead to more hate crimes against them. He's always a bully, punching down at the vulnerable, at the unpopular, at people who are socially marginal, appealing to the basest prejudices of knuckle-dragging ignoramuses, as in Trump voters. He's nauseating. So we can set the clock. I'm very sorry to say this, but it is going to happen again, all right? I forecast by the end of the year there'll be another similar gun massacre where ethnic minority people will be murdered. They might be Somali Americans, they might be Pakistani Americans, they could be Hispanic people, they could be African Americans, I don't know. I would be delighted to be proven utterly wrong. But anyway, remember where you heard it first. Trump's words are going to cause another one of these crimes. And I know that his gun nut supporters say, oh, this is completely unrelated to guns. Yeah, a bit like drugs don't cause drug deaths. Well, those drugs don't take themselves. We'll say it's anything else. We'll say it's family breakdown causes drug deaths, or poverty causes drug deaths. By the way, we're going to do nothing to solve the poverty. Or it's urbanization causes drug deaths, or it's music causes drug deaths, not the actual drugs. Come on, don't be ridiculous. But they'll try saying this with guns. If only there were more guns. Yeah, well, if only there were fewer guns, and if only there were no Trumps.